Folks, welcome once again to the wonderful world of No, it's not. It's the wonderful world of Wii Gamers. I keep forgetting because during lockdown I've imagined myself being in so many more exciting places rather than this room. However, tonight I get to be taken on a journey of adventure and imagination because I get to talk with Jessica Martin and Chris McAuley, the creative minds behind another new project which I'm going to let them talk to you about. Chris, of course, comic book artist, writer. I mean, it's very shortly, it's going to be a stage where people go, oh, that Chris McAuley guy again, in the name of Jesus, would you give us peace? But the rising star will not be stopped. On the other hand, of course, we have a star already risen in Jessica Martin. And yes, you might look and go, oh, that's the girl from Doctor Who. If you nip over onto the International Movie Database, you will find a list of accolades which will cause you many moments of, oh, that was her. And I dare you to check out her theatrical credits as well, because that scroll just keeps on going and going and going. A woman of many, many talents. Now the two of them merge together to create something new and wonderful, and Chris is going to tell us his dark secrets.
I have dark secrets. Okay, interesting. Yeah, you're right. Dark secrets are actually a part of this project. So yeah, we're seeking to bring Bram Stoker's horror and fantasy universe to a wide variety of media. So starting with graphic novels, films, and board games.
So how is it that you two lovely people have come together to be the partnership in this project?
Well, I've got a great story about how I knew Jessica for the first time. Jessica's heard this about 100 billion trillion times now, haven't you?
Tell it in your wonderful storyteller way, Chris.
Yes, drop a chair to the fire and I will tell you. So, yeah, first time I ever watched Doctor Who was The Greatest Show of the Galaxy. I think it was episode 2 or 3, and it was Jessica's wonderful transformation scene. I believed every second of it. Was promptly terrified, and my parents swore that I'd never watch the show ever again. I think I was something like 5 or 6 years of age, and it stayed with me. It was one of those wonderful moments that actually stayed with me, and you know, I became a Doctor Who fan because of that. Now I've been able to retell that story in print with the Doctor Who Annual in 1989. It's just been released, and I've written a little account of that called Mags and Me. Because it was actually a very important part of my life, really, of the start of my Doctor Who fandom. So that's how we kind of pseudo met. And then a couple of years ago, Jessica had been the first. I think I'm right in this. You're the first Doctor Who companion to illustrate your character in Doctor Who in a Doctor Who comic.
That's right. Yeah.
Correct,
I think I'm the first actor in any sort of geek thing. I know there are actors who've written their comic stories, but I don't think any of them have drawn themselves. So it's all very meta.
So that was I had caught the issues that had the Operation Volcano comic attached to them, and Jessica was very kind. I worked for a couple of comic book magazines, and we did a little interview, and yeah, it was fascinating. And when this project came along, I couldn't think of a better artist to have illustrate my vision. You know, Jessica's got this beautiful way of illustrating. Her line work is very delicate. It brings out the best characteristics facially. She's got a fantastic command of anatomy, and you know, very unusual for an artist with all those skills. She also can deliver you know, great contouring and background sketches. So I love that. So I approached Jessica, and here we are. It was actually put that partnership was put together very quickly.
It was literally. It was a very first of all. It was a short conversation, wasn't it, Chris? Because originally it was going to be like a one-off story. He casually dropped the name Decker Stoker into the conversation. I've done this story. This guy called Decker Stoker. Oh yes, he's Bram Stoker's great grandnephew. Has liked my story that I did, and then filling in all the dots. So anyway, ... and then do you fancy doing a story? And I was sort of, you know, when, I don't know if you do know when, but I'm a person, I'm a very plan-oriented kind of a person, which is bad luck for me in show business, because you know what they say about God and plans, you know, and lockdown, etc. But I don't know what I expected. In my comics career, I've very much been a self-initiator of my works. I've done my own comics, my own graphic novels, and the Doctor Who story was the first time, aside from a job that I did for DC, which we'll talk about later, but I was commissioned by Titan Comics to illustrate a story by Richard Dinnick, who's done a lot of Doctor Who stuff. And I was hugely flattered that my work was being chosen for a franchise, because I've always thought of comics are my form of self-expression. I know I'm an actress, but as an actress, it's self-expression through the words, you know, the prose, the plays, the musicals, whatever, of others. But in my comics, it's very much, it's like jazz for me. It's me riffing, telling the stories I want to tell, doing the style I want to do. And sure, I've studied all the your Marvels and DCs, but I never for a million years thought that I would be a person hired by like a proper, you know, comics publisher. So I was very flattered and a little bit surprised that Chris wanted me. I thought that he'd be looking at somebody from, you know, from DC or Marvel, because Dracula is a massive brand, historic brand. We're going right back to Universal Pictures. He's Bela Lugosi, he's Christopher Lee, and so for Chris to say that he likes my way of seeing things, it's a huge compliment. I can relate to that, and I hope I can deliver, because you know it's quite a big thing to do. This is it's not Doctor Who, but it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from.
It's an interesting thing about Dracula, because it's a book that's never been out of print, and the only other books that can really claim that would be religious scripture. And for some people that I've actually met, Dracula is a form of religious scripture. There is that level of fan base, and it's one of those things that I read as a child. I loved. I actually was a fan of Bram Stoker's work. I knew Bram's work quite well. I studied at Trinity University. You can't help but have that influence with Oscar Wilde and Bram Stoker there. And yeah, as Jessica said, really what started this off, it was a comic that I thought was a bit of a throwaway comic. It was part of a horror anthology I had written about Dracula, set 2,000 years in the future. And it's in, if anybody wants to read it, it's in 13th Moon Anthology. And I happened to send it to Decker to have a look at, because I was very concerned that perhaps I was doing the brand of Dracula a disservice. I'm very passionate about making sure that Bram's work and Dracula, they're represented correctly. So Decker looked at it, actually liked it, rang me up and said, "Can I write a foreword to this comic?" So I was very surprised. And then we get into conversation about, well, would you like to adapt the comics into short story formats? We have a 50-50 contract together now. We created our own production company, Stoker McAuley Productions. And we started working on original Dracula stories, original horror stories. We are moving into audiobooks, novels. It's been a bit of a wild ride for the last 3.5 months. But I knew when I was crafting the comics, the most important thing is actually the visual expression on the characters. It's very much, yes, they're action oriented, but it's very much the expression on the characters' faces. Bram was a painter with words. He was also a painter. He created. He's one of the founding members of the Dublin Painting Club. And every time I look at Jessica's work, because we've been Facebook friends now for a couple of years, I can see that. I can see not just that she's taking a picture perfect realistic. She's not creating line work. It's just picture perfect and realistic, but she's crafting the emotion onto that, and it seems very real. Her work's always seemed very real to me. So it wasn't actually her Doctor Who work that drew her to me. It was her sketches that I had saw on Facebook and just that realism, because that's what I'm trying to capture. So that probably answers the question a little more for you, I think, Andy.
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, aside from the question, what's lovely and comes across there, and sorry if this is kind of going off plan or off the mountain path slightly, but it's actually beautiful. The just the lovely respect he's clearly have for where each other comes from. It's very genuine. It's really nice to see it.
Well, I have to say, I have to return the compliment now to Chris, because Chris's writing, truly, he's a poet, and he is, I do believe that Bram Stoker, in his other world that he's in, his parallel universe, has designated Chris to write this, because he has got the narrative skills of somebody who, he understands the genre, he understands the times of Bram Stoker, because a lot of these stories are from this, this genre of 19th century Victorian Gothic, and they're melodramatic, but there is, beneath all the melodrama, there's psychological reality and understanding there, and that's why I think that's why I'm very excited about this as a comic series, because it's going to be a comic series unlike anything. People think they know the Dracula story, and they do. They know the facts, what happens. But there's going to be whole new slants, and there's going to be spin-off scenarios and explorations into characters. And the other thing, I'm touching on this, but I think Chris will expand. The thing that really excites me about Bram Stoker, which I didn't know before Chris and I had the chat, is that he was a man of the theatre. Now, you've said, Andrew, that I've got hundreds of theatre credits, and I do, and I'm very proud of them, and it's the truth. So you can have a look at Google. I've worked in so many theatres across the UK, in London. Funnily enough, I never worked at the Lyceum Theatre, which is where Bram Stoker was the stage manager, and he also managed the affairs of Henry Irving, who, for people that don't know theatre history, but Henry Irving was basically the Laurence Olivier, the Kenneth Branagh, and then some of his age, because they didn't have movies in those days. He was it, and he was a tyrant. And there's a rumor that goes around that actually Bram Stoker wrote Dracula as a kind of veiled Trojan horse for all his feelings about the unplacable demands of Henry Irving. And the other thing, I've got this picture of Henry Irving sort of living on his past glories, just like a vampire. Like, he cannot let the past die. He will not age. He wants to be this eternal deity on the stage. And I think that's an amazing and a very humorous point from which Bram Stoker goes off into this really, really dark Faustian story. It's just, it's incredible. So there are lots of things that I personally can relate to, and that will kind of broaden it out to other people too.
Yes, of course, Henry Irving played Mephistopheles in Faust, and that's a very poignant. That's a very poignant note, that Henry Irving liked to play those kind of narcissistic, demonic characters. He really enjoyed that. And that was, I think, I might be correct in this, I'd have to defer to Decker about it, but I think Faust is the key to Dracula, in my mind. There are many deals with devils that we do, and Dracula is one of the most prevailing devils, I think, of the theatre and cinematic world. And I think Irving was one of the personages that Bram crafted in there. Again, that's another fascinating subject, and there's a lot of emotional resonance. I think when people watch very dry documentaries about Bram Stoker, or they pick up books, they don't get the emotional resonance that Bram has as a writer, and he really does paint pictures with his words, and he's a delight to adapt to comic books because of that. You can look at what he writes, and you can picture it in your head, and it becomes this fantastic still frames in a film, That's essentially what a comic book is. The lovely thing about a comic book or graphic novel, whatever way you want to term it, I think Alan Moore had a problem with the term graphic novel. But you can look at those pictures forever. You can look at that still image trapped in glass for as long as you want. So the artist and the writer have the ability to craft very small, minute details, which will captivate people for a long time. During their, I mean, one of my aims in this is not to have people just read something once, think it's a good story, and move on. And with the greatest respect for superhero stories, that's generally what happens. I think the comic book media has that potential for people to be lost in a world. I remember whenever I was talking to Pat Mills about the first time Mike McMahon had created Mega City 1. And most people will probably be familiar with the fantastic poster of Mega City 1 that came out early issues of 2018. You could almost step inside that frame and live there.
Yeah. And
that's what I'm aiming for with people. I want to take people on this journey. So if we want to talk about Dracula, I want them to go on this journey with Jonathan Harker. I want them to see Dracula. And for a lot of people, they'll be seeing the true Dracula for the first time whenever Jessica illustrates the character, because you may know a Dracula, but you don't know the Dracula. If you follow the Dracula story through cinematic history, you've maybe caught glimpses of the Dracula in the novels. And even Ford Coppola's version of Dracula was not a true depiction of the Count in the novel. I actually personally think it was quite cheeky that he stuck Bram Stoker's name on it when there are some references that he puts and some spins he puts on the novel that are not necessarily accurate. But that began with Bela Lugosi. So you have the idea of the romantic Eastern European, very handsome individual with Bela Lugosi in films, and Dracula is anything but that. He is a member of the undead. He has hairy hands, which a lot of people don't realize, but in the description, he has hairy hands. Just imagine somebody with hairy hands touching you. It's not pleasant. It's not a pleasant experience.
I suppose, to be fair,
and when you say
he did live on his own for quite a long time.
Sorry, Andy, what did you say?
I was going to say, to be fair, he did live on his own for quite a long time.
He lived on his own. Yeah, he didn't have any personal groomers there or anything like that. But he did have 3 wives, so you'd have thought they might have looked after him a little bit more. When it came to grooming. I know my wife is always badgering me to groom myself a little bit better. But yeah, you have that. You have that whole thing with he's got hairy hands. He's got the moustache. He's quite a striking individual, but he kind of exudes this sort of menace that, to be fair, we don't really see a whole lot of. I think Hollywood has created this quite romantic, cuddly version of Dracula rather than a true member of the undead that most cultures were terrified of.
I suppose it is one of those things that the nature of a Hollywood, a cinematic setting, is that you're going to try and appeal to a certain audience base. And whether you go down the blood, guts and gore route, or you go down for the quiet romance route, or you go down for the kind of Hitchcock sort of psychological terror route, they present a version of that character that's going to resonate with the audience that they're after. And as you say, they're glimpses of the character, but none of them are the character in whole.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, when I say Dracula, most people would look at Bela Lugosi, and I love there's an image that Jessica has crafted of Bela Lugosi, and it's absolutely beautiful, and I love that. And that's a version of Dracula that I really appreciate. His pauses, his timing, it's absolutely fantastic. I really like that version. Likewise, I like Christopher Lee's version as well. The vampire scene in 30 Days of Night would be more akin to the vampire mythology that I would be familiar with. I mean, Ireland is actually the home of the vampire, rather than Transylvania. The oldest vampire stories actually come from Ireland, and that's what Bram was drawing on. So it's going to be a fascinating look at all of that, all of what was bubbling away under the surface with Bram, and trying to bring a freshness to a familiar story, a familiar but yet unfamiliar story for so many.
Well,
so we are hoping to craft the definitive version together.
Well, that kind of almost answers, I think, really the next question, which was, has the design sort of been set with very clear parameters for you, or do you kind of have the freedom to go where you want? And it kind of sounds like the answer is yes to both parts. The parameters are there in the form that you want to really honour the original text, but you still have the freedom to take it where you want because no one's actually gone down that path before, bar the original novel.
Yes.
Yes, sorry.
That's true. I mean, I'm going to throw in my my cross pollinating link here. So, coincidence. I worked on the Doctor Who story, and that's how Chris and I were in conversation. When Chris got in touch with me a couple of months ago, I had just literally signed a contract for my own graphic novel, which is based on a real life actor. Now, the actor was a German film actor called Conrad Veidt. And comic book fans will know his face, even though they don't know his name, because the original image for the Joker, which was created by Bob Kane, was based on Conrad Veidt's face, the makeup he wore for a silent movie called The Man Who Laughs.
Yeah.
Now, Conrad Veidt, I won't go too much into it because it's kind of away from our subject, but he's not. So his history in German cinema was he came up through the early silent movies and he starred in the seminal horror film that all sort of cinema fans cite as the very first horror film, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And that was all about a circus magician traveling around the country, and he goes to this little town and he brings with him something that looks like a coffin, and inside it is his puppet, his golem called Cesare. And this golem was played by a 25-year-old Conrad Veidt, who looks saturnine. It's the only way to describe it. He looks like a cadaver. He had this 6'2" body, beautiful in real life, these big green eyes. And the man had survived the First World War. He had been hospitalized with typhoid. And I think the reason why he was so skeletal was he probably never really recovered from that disease. And he had this look that made him a favorite. All these silent movie directors put him in things like, there was a film called Eerie Tales. He was in something called The Januskopf, which was stolen from the Jekyll and Hyde story. So basically, F.W. Murnau, who made the original Nosferatu, stolen from Dracula, he stole Robert Louis Stevenson's story, Dr. Jekyll, cast Conrad Veidt as the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde character, and somebody was playing an extra, basically, he was playing a butler, and that somebody was a young actor called Bela Lugosi, who was traveling, he was living in Berlin, he was from Hungary, and actually I've got a scene in my comic where Conrad Veidt sort of saying, oh, you're going to stay in, thinking you're settling in Berlin? And Lugosi says, no, really, next week I am getting on board a ship. I'm going to the USA where I can make my fortune. And of course, the rest is history, because Lugosi got into the Broadway production of Dracula, became a big star. And ironically, Conrad Veidt, when he made The Man Who Laughs at Universal Pictures, Carl Laemmle, who was the great director who started all this kind of series of horror films with Dracula, Frankenstein, etc., he gave Conrad Veidt a sound test for Dracula. He wanted him to play Dracula, and in the end, because his English wasn't quite good enough, and obviously Bela Lugosi had this big following from Broadway, it was Lugosi who played the part. But I just thought, shit, this is so weird. I'm just sorry. You can delete that. It's not as bad as the other words.
But I plan to swear later, so you're all right.
Chris literally got in touch with me as my head is inside this whole story of Conrad Veidt, and I'm living in a world of Weimar Germany, which is extremely dark, demonic. I mean, Chris, you're talking about Faust being the trope that Henry Irving was obsessed with. And in German theatre and cinema, just before the First World War, and then definitely after, they were all about tyrants, they were all about Faustian pacts. And Conrad Veidt just seemed to be, even though he was actually he was a person of the light in his own life, and he did wonderful things, which you have to read the book to find out about. But as far as he, as being like an artist model, he was the perfect cipher for playing people like, Borgia, Rasputin he played, and I think he would have made a great Dracula. So there you go.
Everything's connected.
You see, I don't think there's any such thing as coincidence. The more that we converse, Jessica, the more that I think that that's all been sort of brought together in a very strange way.
We're in the Matrix. I watched the Matrix over lockdown it's my son's favourite film, and I haven't seen it for 20 years, but oh my God, the shivers were going as I watched it. I'm thinking, bloody hell, we are in it, aren't we? But it can be a good thing. I do see more coincidences as I go through my life, which, I've acquired quite a few decades now. And I think when you see the dots and you see they should be joined up, you go for it. And then the more dots appear.
Yeah. It's like the Ghostbusters, you have to answer the call, don't you?
Well, that's it.
Yes.
I think
the Ghostbusters.
With you.
Oh, sorry, Andrew, we lost you here. Have you gone on to
No.
The meandering plains of rabbit holes, or
listen? This isn't my first dance with creative type people. I know exactly that. You throw a question out there, and half an hour later they come back and go, "Sorry, does that answer what you asked me?" No, but it is an interesting thing that. Quite often, you're right. You can be involved in a number of things over the course of your life, and inconsequential. They don't matter today, they don't matter tomorrow, and then suddenly one day you're sitting in the pub, you turn around, you say something, and boom, 4 or 5 things that you've done up until that point coalesce in that moment, in that conversation with somebody else who's done 4 or 5 things in their life, and boom, there's a new direction being taken. And that meeting could have happened 6 months ago, it could have happened 2 years ago, but it happened now, and it needed to happen now, and that's when it can roll forward. You call it coincidence, I don't know. I think there's a greater plan at work there, certainly where you two are involved.
Well, can I throw in another illusion, another literary illusion? So W.B. Yeats was a contemporary of Bram Stoker, and years ago I did English literature back in my former years, and I remember we were reading these Yeats poems, and there was a really weird one which was talking about the concentric circles of existence, and basically he didn't believe in time as a linear thing. He had the Doctor Who idea that time is happening in a circular fashion. We're in these kind of concentric circles, and that's what I feel that I'm in this, one can go through life and you sort of think, oh, that happened because of this, or why did that happen? But I'm at this moment in time where I sort of think, it's happening. It is all happening. And what's past is now and the future is now. Anyway, I shut up there. I'm getting too esoteric for my own good. But I'm absolutely with you both. Serendipity, what's the word? A glitch in the time thing, the Matrix, where we can actually see the coincidence. It's all there. It's great.
Alan Moore has a great concept about writing and about magic. So most people know that I'm out at Freemason, and I'm quite happy to talk about it. But Alan Moore talks about magic and the process of magic and what it actually is. Now, it's no coincidence that we use the term spell for a witch or a wizard, because it's a very powerful thing. And he looks at the fact that all reality is malleable. And it's all about how we use words, how we use intention, how we use thought. And you go on YouTube and you look at motivational speakers. That's exactly what they're tapping into. Grant Morrison is another guy who's quite eloquent about that sort of stuff, about the nature of reality and how fluid it actually is, and our part in it. I've never been one who believes in predestination. I think you have choices to make, and it's the choices that actually then affect it affects your present, your future, and your perception of the past, which can be a very powerful and self-transformative thing. So I ascribe to a lot of stuff that Mer has talked about when it comes to writing and drawing and creation. He's a very wise man.
Yes, and so are you, though, Chris. You will be inspiring other people in the same way that Alan Moore and Grant Morrison and Jack Kirby have inspired the ones that, who've come after them. I think that your way of telling a story will, it will fire people. What it will fire in people is not to do derivative things where people are writing, but what they're really doing is they've seen a piece of writing and they want to write like that. I mean, I used to do that myself. I used to think, oh, I'm going to write like this, and it didn't sound like me. You've got your own voice, and you just write. It's like bareback riding. There's no holds. You just go for it, and there are so many rules, techniques, masterclasses, etc. The one book that I really love, that I always go to when I want inspiration and creation, is Stephen King's On Writing. It's just the best read, and it gets you excited about creating. He's got that same thing. It's just that it's the mojo. It's just awakening the mojo and knowing that story is about, in the end, it's not even about the facts, it's about the way that you make people feel. And I think that that's what our joint mission is. We want to make people feel something when they read and look at these comics. We want them to feel as excited as if they've seen a really good film, or something that made them think, oh, I thought I'd seen everything on Netflix, but hey, there's this.
Well, there's 2 points I want to segue in with that. And I'm quite happy sharing this one. That I think I talked to you about this, Jessica, whenever I was writing the script for a comic that's coming out at Stoker Fest this year. So I can't talk too much about the actual what's inside it, but when I was writing it, it was a very strange process. I don't remember much about writing it. All I remember is there was elements of it where I was actually crying as I was writing it. And Decker read it. I can tell you it's a biographical piece. It's a biographical story about Bram's family. And Decker had the same emotional reaction. And I am not afraid of that. I think it's very important. I've actually, sometimes people come to me for advice. And I say, if you're writing something that's very powerful and very powerful for you, write it with your tears, write it with your anger, write it with your emotions, because it comes through. I did work on a comic with somebody who cried when they were drawing something that I had described, and I had hit something very personal with them. I didn't realise that. And I told them to leave the tears on the original pages. And when we turned them into digital, you could see there's little marks, but I said it was very important because they had illustrated that with their own emotions, with their own tears. So a lot of the work that I do comes from somewhere. And again, it's not necessarily automatic writing, but there's something that I've tapped into with this project that has become very powerful for me. So I always urge people to go and search for that. That's a part of your voice. It's to go and search for those projects that you do feel pulled to, that actually talk to you. Creation is never a one-way street. True creation leads you down many avenues, many thought processes, and you touch so many different people. The second thing is that when Jessica mentions Netflix, I have a real problem with how passive our culture has become. There are so many creators, potential creators and creatives out there. I worry because we're in a pandemic. We should be seeing a lot more creative material out there. We should be seeing a lot more comic book work. We should be seeing a lot more art work. We should be seeing a lot more poetry, a lot more theatre work, a lot more audio dramas. We're not. What we're seeing is the rise of people binge watching.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I've got caught up in that. I've got caught up in the whole, my wife sort of you know, sitting at the chair and go, come and sit down. And, you know, the latest thing we're actually watching is I think it's called Extreme Tuna. I always get it wrong. Or Wicked Tuna or something like that. And it's about tuna fishermen. But I found myself absolutely dragged into this personal story. It's like a documentary, a personal story of these fishermen. In a way, I don't know anything about fishing, but now I can tell you bits and pieces about fishing and about what it means to these people in these communities. So that's been quite a positive sort of binge watch at night, where I can just switch off and I don't have to think about narrative. But for most people, I think the binge watch can be very destructive. And you have to look at the quality of work that's actually being encouraged by, you know, the streaming services. And again, this is very controversial. I've worked in The Mandalorian, but I'm quite happy to say on record that I think it lost its way a bit. I think that the original premise of having a Western in space was inspired. I love that. I love the aspect of, you know, the protection, the very fatherly, because we don't, as a society, we don't extol the nature of, you know, being a parent. It's not seen as being, you know, sort of action orientated. It's not seen as being sort of this quite boring thing. But you see that in The Mandalorian, and he's very active in the parenting of this kid. You know, he gets worried about him. He's scared. And I loved seeing that. But it kind of then sort of went to the second season. I didn't see a whole lot of character progression, and I've actually said that during meetings, so I'm not really worried about that getting broadcast. I'm really not. But it's that, you know, I want to see more character development in shows. I want to go on that journey, and we used to do that. And I'm going to give a shout out to Stephen Wyatt, who we both know, Jessica. And, you know,
yes, Stephen Wyatt. All hail to Stephen, because Stephen wrote he wrote Paradise Towers before The Greatest Show in the Galaxy for Doctor Who. Stephen does not see himself as a Doctor Who writer. He just sees himself as a writer, and that he is. He's just wonderful. You know, it's amazing. I think the great, lovely man, lovely generous man, and in The Greatest Show alone, he created a sort of like a whole mythology within the Doctor Who story of these wonderful characters that people have remembered. You talk about
Stephen's one of these guys who takes characters and crafts this environment and an emotional journey. So you know, how I met Stephen was again through Jessica, you know, through Greatest Show in the Galaxy. I was writing on this annual, and I had this idea, and I wanted to kind of write Mags's origin story. So I went to Stephen and went, Stephen, can I do this? And he said, well, can I have a look at it? And he was very gracious. He looked at it and he said, you know, that's really good. He said, yeah, go on ahead, you know, put that down, you know. And I did. And obviously Jessica got to see it as well. It wasn't just me starting to write this thing and going, well, I think Mags did this, and I think, but it was
funny enough, I felt that what you described was exactly as I imagined the origins of Mags as well. So it's almost as if
it was very spooky.
You have kind of transcribed the story that is there.
You take Mags, for example, and Stephen takes that character on this journey, and that was the journey that I loved. And then we get, you know, the audios. We've got the Big Finish audios that I've got 3 of them, Jessica. I've listened to 2. I'm on to the last one.
Okay.
And you take the character on that journey as well, which is great. You know, we get a fantastic picture. But Stephen crafted this just this fantastic character that's endured.
Which out of blueprint, all these other stories and more stories can happen.
Yeah, and that's the kind of creative talent that I would like to see showcased more. I'm hopefully going to be working with Stephen on a few projects soon, and I love to see that. And just as a personal note about Stephen, he's one of the nicest guys that you could ever talk to, and you know, everybody, whenever I start chatting to them, it's like, oh God, he's going to talk about Doctor Who again. Well, yes, I am, but in this in this context that, Stephen, when you crafted Paradise Towers, I could see the crumbling Art Deco. I could see the crumbling of society. I could see what you did there. I could see that the social rules had gone to shit. There you go. There's my article of swearing in this whole conversation. They had gone to absolute shit. You had cannibals who, you know, were these nice old ladies. And then suddenly the cannibals, there's moments of absolute genius of character design there. And like Stephen's done countless different, you know, radio plays, and apart from Doctor Who, so I don't let's focus on Doctor Who. But he's one of the people that I think can really inspire the next generation of creatives. And that's what I want to see during the pandemic. I would have loved to have seen, you know, a lot more emphasis on that, rather than just sort of stay at home, you know, drink your beer, watching your Netflix. It's, you know, look at the skills maybe that you have the time now to learn. Is there a story that you've got? You know, go and create a story. And I don't care whether people create fanzines or, you know, nowadays with the internet, you can pretty much stick your ideas up on the internet. You know, create a blog, write stories about characters that you love. My wife does that. I've just outed her. She's not here, so that's all right. But she does that. I encourage it. She writes, and you know, it's important because it's about that creative aspect. So I'm desperately trying to get more people to harness that. And if folk are looking at our work and saying, you know, well, how the hell have they done this? Because that's a serious question. When I'm sure it's the same with you, Jessica, when you're at conventions, people look at everything you've done. And one of the things I sincerely love about you is that everything you've done is an expression of yourself, whether it's spitting image or, you know, your illustration, you know, or your musical abilities. It's all a sincere expression of yourself. I think actually comedy is the hardest thing it's the hardest skill to master in yourself. I think that's the hardest.
I'm saying, kind of comedy has been the thing that got me my start. And because, I mean, I could say it came naturally, but of course I learned a lot from the people that I work with. I was working with these fantastic performers who'd been through variety, you know, people like Gary Wilmot and Bobby Davro. So I'm a real magpie. I learn on the job. This is how I've gone through life, because although I mentioned I did English and drama as a degree, but not as a vocational subject like going to RADA. So I was learning everything theoretically. And then when I went out into the big wide world and I had no opportunities to act because I hadn't gone to a prescribed drama school, I just had to get an act together. And I knew I could do voices. And you two fellas are from Northern Ireland. And of course, my late mother was from County Fermanagh. And so every summer we'd go home to Ederney and go to the family farmhouse, and everybody would get up and do a turn. And so what I had to do was I used to get up and be, oh, Jessica, go on, do the Cilla Black show. And I turned into Cilla Black and Hilda Ogden, who was a big character on Coronation Street before you were born, and all these, you know, just kind of drop into these voices. And my mother was just a born mimic. She could never tell a story without turning into the characters. So the storytelling and the voices kind of went together. And then the other thing that I used to do was I used to draw continuously from when I was about like 3-4 years old. As soon as I could hold a biro, it was never a pencil. I used to be sketching, you know, film stars off the old movies, because I love the old movies, the black and white films. And that was my world that I lived in. I think I didn't regard myself as being particularly weird or peculiar, but I must have been quite an odd child. I didn't like going out to play with my cousins and my sister. I was always indoors around the adults and watching these films and just being a bit, I guess I like to think that it's probably because I had a past life or something and I wanted to get to my adulthood. I knew what I wanted to do. But, you know, there are lots of children even now who are probably like the way I was. I have my particular things I liked, but I knew not to go around shouting about them, because very quickly we cotton on as children as to what's normal and what's not. So it's so lovely. I'm at the age I am now and I'm living my childhood, my dream in childhood was to be able to sit and draw all day and to be creating stories, and that's exactly what I'm doing. And I may not be performing the voices because, you know, we've got the lockdown on theatre, but I do audio books. And in a way, so much of being an actor is you always have to prove yourself. You can never relax. You're only as good as your last show, your last series, your last theatre performance. But when you write or you make art, you leave your mark. And it doesn't matter if 5 people see it or 10 people see it, it's there. It's, you know, you've captured it.
Yeah.
So that's really, if, you know, people said to me now, look, we've only got so many hours in the day, you've got to make a choice. What's it to be? I think what I'm going to be doing now, which is I'm going to be illustrating the Stoker McAuley stories, and I'm going to be doing my Conrad White book, and that's more than enough. But I'm in my heaven, because everything that I've done, you know, whether it's Spitting Image or a funny sketch and Copycats or a comic, it's all storytelling. They're all different ways of doing the same thing. And in all of these things, it's like the play thing, the story thing. You can have all the technique in the world. You can show off as much as you like. You can have 1 million Instagram followers, but it doesn't change whether the thing sings or it doesn't. Am I right, Chris?
You're quite correct. I actually I'm going to pay you a backhand compliment with the accent there. So most people know I've done a little bit of work with Brent Spiner. So Brent's Data in Star Trek. How I met Brent, my wife and I were going to get a coin signed for her father. He's a Star Trek nut. My wife loves Star Trek. I didn't watch it that much, but she's kind of inducted me, actually taped me to the chair and made me watch it. So we were standing in line, and she was very, very excited. Now, people think that this is a costume that I wear. Andy can attest. This is actually what I wear most days. Andy's met me dressed in.
We are cut from the same cloth, sir.
I think so, yeah. So, you know, they always say dress for the job that you want. So, hey, but yeah, we were standing in line, and she was very nervous to get up to Brent, and he's signing the coin, and she's sort of talking to him, and then he catches my accent, and I'm there sort of as a member of press, and oh, where are you from? So Northern Ireland. He tries this Northern Irish accent, and Jessica. Yeah, you would have had the same reaction as I had, and I stopped him, and I said, with acting skills like that, it's no wonder you haven't been on television for 10 years. And then he stopped. He put his pen down, and I think this was the moment my wife was like, "Okay, right." So apparently he had read a lot of stuff I had written. I didn't realize that he was a comic book fan. So. When he realised who I was, we had this lovely conversation where he told me 250 bottles of Bushmills Anniversary that he used to bring round to people's homes, and we got a lovely photograph with him. And he's a genuinely sarcastic sod, but a very nice guy. And yeah, lovely guy. So that, you know, first of all, Jessica, look, you can do a Northern Irish accent anytime. It's fine. That's great. I love that. But yeah, Brent, if you're watching this, and you probably will be at some stage, please don't ever again.
We know where you
kudos to him, because he obviously has got he's a humble guy, because if you'd said that to the wrong person, oh my, you know.
Well, I've worked with Shatner, so.
To be fair, if you know anyone from Northern Ireland, there's a good chance that if they're still in your friends list, you have at some stage developed calluses on your personality to cope with knowing somebody from Northern Ireland. Because our way of showing affection is to tell you what a bollocks you are.
Yeah.
Well, I know that from my mum's family. They always used the saying when I was a kid. On my mum's family side was, "Oh, self-praise is no praise." And that,
yeah.
Don't you never get too big for your boots. So, you know, I think it's certainly always kept me if not humble, real.
Grounded. Do you know, if you went back to Edinburgh even now, Jessica, there'll probably be a wee old man with his welly boots on, sitting with his pipe or standing at a fence at a gate, and if you said, you don't know Jessica Martin, do you? And they'll think for a minute and go, Dawn the wee strange girl used to live up on the farm yonder.
It's terrifying though. My wife experienced that when she lived in Ireland for 16 years. Or sorry, 16 months for me. You know, it probably seemed like 16 years to you. But you know, we went into the pub for the first time, and you know, there's this you know, lovely Canadian girl with the accent and all the rest of it coming in with me, and suddenly it's like, who's that? And there were people following me, literally blokes following me into the toilet, going, "Who's that, Chris? Who's that? Is your wife there? And what's that?" And you know, I come from a little village that if you asked for wine, you know, you have, it's a bit, you know, it's a strange thing to ask for wine. It's either like beer or spirits. You might know this, Andy, but beer or spirits, right? Yep. So she comes up and she says, you know, what type of wine do you have? And the wee man behind the bar goes, well, love, we've got red or we've got white. Okay, I'll have the red, please. Do you want it served in a clean glass or a dirty glass?
No.
Oh, absolutely. And she just looked at me and I said, well, it depends how many vaccinations you've had before you've come here. You know, what way do you want to do this? But that's kind of the thing. Now, feel free to cut this one out, so I'll give this a bit of a pause. Right? And continue. There might be one more piece of work, Jessica. You might have noticed that I've written a Doctor Who book. Right. You might get a wee tap on the shoulder from our publisher to go, Jessica,
sorry.
Would you like to read that out?
I need to interject here. No. I need to interject a moment. Jessica, he didn't write a Doctor Who book. He wrote it in a night. Last night, he wrote a Doctor Who novel.
Yeah.
He's not. He's great. There is no other person like him.
Yeah. Last
night. I had a story.
You've got to look after yourself. But I mean, lots of people, look, there are a lot of, without naming names, I know a lot of comic book writers who claim to, I'm like the fastest writer in the West, but there's a difference between writing and writing quality. And, you know, I'm sure this book is going to go big guns with the Doctor Who.
I think it's fun. I think it's a wee bit of fun, actually. It's just a wee bit of fun. But I had to interject there when you said, you know, if I'm doing this, and they're going, yeah, you just never know what's around the corner with Stoker McAuley at times. It's like, oh, well, we have this little thing and we have this little thing. So you can feel free to edit that one out.
No,
that's just a wee aside, you know. That's a wee aside of, you know, just that you get a little tidbit while you're.
Yeah, I mean,
you're getting the scoop here, Andrew. You know, this is our the very first time that Chris and I have publicly spoken on a podcast about any of it.
Yeah, and
this is history.
In some cases, it's the first time you're now finding out about some of this.
I know. I'm all for that. I love a surprise. That's the other thing. People used to say to me, how do you cope with the uncertainty of show business? And I have to say it was like the worst thing about it and the best thing, because you don't want to know everything that's going to happen. You want surprises. You want to be delighted or shocked or being made to, oh my God, I've got to step up to the plate. It's good for you.
Yeah, you need adrenaline can benefit from it.
I'm officially allowed to say this though. So here's an experience, Jessica, you might find funny. So I think I told you about Claudia Christian been involved in. Yeah. I was certainly involved, you know. So what happened was we got official congratulations from Claudia, which is lovely, and I've known Claudia for a couple of years, and I still have yet to finish Babylon 5. So I always have to apologise for that, but I still have yet to finish that whole thing. I will do it. I promise I will do it because I'm writing the Babylon 5 book at the minute. But that's neither here nor there. Anyway, so Claudia sends official congratulations, and then I get to thinking maybe I could write a little audio for, you know. So I sit down and write this thing for 15 minutes, sort of saying that. That's one of those things. It's kind of like, is it any good? Is it something? So what I try and do is I try and write. So if anybody gets involved, Stoker McAuley, I try and write for them. So what I've been doing for a few people, I've been saying, give me the dream character you've always wanted to play, and then it's my challenge to kind of create that. So I created this character and a story, which is, hopefully going to be turned into a part of an audiobook. So she immediately came back and said, "That's great." And then I had to explain that I just sat down and wrote the thing, that it maybe wasn't the best constructed, but it just snowballed. And we had a lovely phone call and we talked about it. And it's one of those things that I find the most refreshing part of all of this, where it's, you can have an idea, you can do it, you can tailor it for people, you can get everybody excited about it. And it means more. I think it means more, rather than me just having my own vision about certain things. It's like, I've got a structure here, give me a character, and let me try and write and craft something for you. And that's a little insight to the inner workings of, what Stoker McAuley Productions is trying to do with everybody we work with, So I thought that was quite funny.
It is great because you're working. You're almost like the old days of the Hollywood studios, which people who were in it used to complain about. Oh, I'm a contract player, or oh, I'm signed up for 7 years. But the thing about those studios was they turned out so much product, so many different stories, so many different genres. People were discovered because of these vehicles. And people don't sort of, except in the comic book world, and maybe now I guess it's happening in Netflix, but this idea of something that can be part of something that can grow, that can mushroom, and that can benefit lots of people it's a great thing to see happening, and for you to be an enabler as well as a creator, but to sort of be the agent for creativity in other people was got to be a good thing, because there's room for everybody with their different talents.
And to be honest, I've had a lot of people submitting different things, from audio plays, board games, artistic endeavours, and this is an open call out for people. If they have a project they think they would like to get on with, Stoker McAuley, if it's a game or if it's a book idea or whatever, come and talk to me. I can help you. If maybe it doesn't suit our brand, it doesn't mean that I won't spend time to sit and talk with you to see where this can go. I am not silly. I realise how fortunate I've been. I have a little bit of experience about comic books and publishing and all sorts of things now, which I've been very privileged to have. But I want to pass that on to people. I want the next generation of creators to be able to maybe not struggle as much as they have done. I think there's a lot of incredibly good ideas out there. I mean, I work in the indie comic book scene still. I still work as a colorist in the indie comic book scene, and I won't give that up, because I found that there's so many imaginative, different stories out there. A lot of representation out in the indie comic book world that there isn't necessarily in the mainstream. I've worked on LGBT comics and comics representing people of color and written by both groups, and it's amazing to sit and listen to those life stories, or to look at those very powerful, resonating narratives that come from those experiences, that I hope mainstream eventually embraces, because you want to see the funding for that.
Yes.
And that's very important to me. So it's I think our publishers open to those ideas too. So if people want to use me as a conduit and come to me and say, I've got an idea, if it doesn't fit the Stoker McAuley brand, that's okay. I will try and put you into contact with somebody who can help you. That's a very open call. Just, I'll do what I can.
We'll put his mobile
There you
number.
go. There speaks Father Christmas.
Yep. His mobile number is coming up on the bottom of the screen.
Disney Father Christmas.
That's right. That was actually terrifying. I have to say, I can kind of say this because I don't think anybody from Disney would say this, but that was terrifying being Santa Claus for. So as sort of mentioned previously, or on The Mandalorian, well, I work with legendary. I have to say, she will be watching this. So legendary Disney creator Terry Hardin. So most people know Terry. So Terry. Like Terry's worked on. So she started her work with Jim Henson, And then she moved on to Ghostbusters, so she created the Proton Packs and Stay Puft Marshmallow Man and Slimer and all the iconic stuff that just as has stayed through the test of time. To Men in Black, dinosaurs. She was involved in the Dinosaurs TV show. She's created Disney Park attractions. That's what she's mostly known for now. She's a massive Star Wars nut. I'm allowed to tell you, I'm actually crafting her biography at the minute.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's fascinating. But it's she asked me, did I want to be Santa? So what I've been doing over Christmas is doing Zoom calls with Santa. So don't always look like this. For Christmas time, I dye this white, which is a hell of a painstaking experience, and stripped most of the skin from my face during it. But I always do this for charity. When I was back home, I did 10 years for the Northern Ireland Cancer Fund for Children. So if anybody's listening to this and they want to donate to the charity, please go and donate to them. They're not government funded. They do so much. They actually support kids, not just kids who have cancer, but families. And we know now with hospital car parking fees, it can be astronomical to go and have your kid checked up or have treatment. So they pay for that. They also pay for home tuition for kids, and they try and get home nursing for children as well, so that so they're okay in that sense, So it's done for the family environment. So I did Santa for 10 years with them, but I wasn't able to grow quite a bushy beard for that. I had to wear the fake stuff, but now I've grown the beard. I've become quite committed to it all. So over here, I work with the hospices, the kids' hospices, and I've done that now for two or 3 years, and tried to be Santa at the schools and things. And then this year, I got asked to do a commercial for a homeless charity, and then I got asked to do a commercial for a food charity that seeks to sort of deliver food to people maybe who need a little help. So I did that, and then on the cusp of that, then I got asked by Disney to do to be Santa, to be their Santa on the day before Christmas Eve. So yeah, that was a fascinating and absolutely utterly terrifying experience for somebody who's just, I'm not an actor in any way, shape, or form, but I truly believe in Christmas. So it was a lovely experience to have kids ask me lots of questions. And I get asked once. I actually got asked by a kid there a couple of weeks ago, "Are you Tim Allen?" No.
Of course.
No, I'm cheaper than Tim Allen.
Yeah, I really was voluntarily, So it is funny because they ask you all the questions about the Christmas Chronicles. I get asked lots of questions about that. So I had to say, well, no, I advocated Kurt Russell being Santa, and I trained them up, and the thing is that Kurt Russell was better looking than me, so they went to him, But it's nice to be able to do that sort of thing at Christmas time. So, and did you do Panto? Was that right, Jessica? You did Panto with Steve Paul? No.
All the adverts were up, and we were all set to go. And then, of course, we got the tier 4. I've lost count of what tier.
Oh, dear.
But you know what? There's always a silver lining. So I was saying earlier to Andrew that you know how it is, Chris. There are not enough hours in the day to write the stories, let alone draw things. So for me, every hour I get back where I don't have to go out, I know it's very sad, and it is desperate for a lot of people. But personally speaking, I feel good. My solitary confinement, or maybe not solitary confinement, can only be beneficial. I'll get shit done.
It's the same with me with my cancer diagnosis. I can't really go out anywhere. I haven't been out now in months, so it's been quite difficult just to promote the beer. Yeah. So if you want to put a flash of the beer can up, Andrew, for this moment,
there will be. I'm just thinking, poor Jessica, sitting there going, time and constraints and all the rest of it. You do realise, Jessica, Chris has typewriter. Most people in their bathroom have like a mount for like the toilet roll. Whereas Chris actually has a mount with a typewriter, and even it's just a scary world in Chris's head, because everywhere he goes, Chris is creating. It doesn't matter if Chris rings me at 3 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Every time he rings me, it's something new that he's just done. He's just been asked to do, and usually about like 24 minutes later, he's ringing me and go, "Here, I've sent you through. See what you think of that." "Oh, it's done already. Is it right?" if we needed a real Doctor Who, I think it's him. Because I think he's breaking the laws.
There might be an opening, but then Decker would kill me. I wouldn't be allowed, you know. I wouldn't be allowed.
No, you'd go
but that isn't it, you know. I would far rather write the stories than you know. I don't think I'd be very good in front of the camera, mate. I think I'd be better writing the story. That's actually a dream. That would be the dream. I would love to, Jessica. I would love to write, you know, an episode. One of my mentors, Neil Gaiman, did that, and it just was this wonderful, crazy sort of, you know, typical Gaiman story. But I think that would be it. I think I would retire on that. I think I would just go, yeah, that's it. The problem is I would want to write it for Sylvester McCoy, who's my Doctor. So we'd have to get him encouraged. You know, here, put the hat on, would you? Here's the umbrella. Yeah. There's Andy's. There's Andy's. There's Andy's sweatshirt.
Here, take my jumper.
I think he's washed it.
Yeah.
I think he's washed it. I think he might all right.
Give it a rest. But you could do that. You could do that.
You know what? I don't think you're going to have to hold your hat out and ask, because the world is coming to you now, Chris, and I think you thoroughly deserve it. So
that is very kind of you.
And you know, you just are a born writer. You're a born storyteller, so you can't stop nature. It'll all come to you when it comes.
One of the old Hollywood guys years ago, I remember watching in one of those sort of like History Channel interviews, and he had done a story that I can't remember now if it was for Chaplin or if it was for the Marx Brothers or something like that there. But anyway, whoever it was had come to him and says, "Oh, we need a film. We need a new story. We need something for tomorrow." And he literally just sort of leant into his drawer, took out a sheaf of paper and said, "There you go. There's the story." It's just, what, done already? Oh, flicks through it. Oh, this story isn't about us. He says, a good story is a good story, and you put the characters in that you need and let them do what you want them to do, and just let the story carry on. And I mean, when you look at a lot of the classic Who stories, that's what's there. I mean, Paradise Tower is a classic one where, you know, the story's happening and the Doctor just appears and does some stuff and kind of leaves. But the story would have gone on without him. Yeah. And that's what Chris does. Yeah. Chris throws things together, and it doesn't really matter who the characters are. I don't mean the characters don't matter. But the story's there. And then these people appear and interact with the story, and then whatever happens, happens.
Yes. That's the way to do it. And that's the way, because writing is rewriting as well. So if you're somebody who thinks, oh my God, I've only got 2 stories that I ever want to write, you're just not going to have a career, because you've got to be prepared to throw stuff, and you can only do that if you have an abundance of ideas. So
absolutely. I think I tell people, I've told people not to binge watch, but be selective in your watching. So a lot of my ideas come from things that I've maybe subconsciously lifted from. Now I'm very consciously looking at films. I'm looking at TV shows. I'm looking at environments and sets. I'm looking at what draws me to a character, what repels me. Yeah. All of that sort of stuff. Yeah. And once you start looking at the world that way, you'll find you have so many stories that you want to tell. Yeah. Your whole life is a story, so make sure it's a goddamn good one. And that's what I always tell people, you know.
I don't know that I'm looking forward to the graphic novel about tuna fishermen coming.
God, I could write it. I mean, in my head, honest to God, there's a character called Paulie. And Paulie's this guy you just always root for. He's a goddamn hero. The guy is fantastic. He's out there every day fishing. He's got such a positive attitude, but he had a bit of a problem with his previous captain. He was a bit of one of these tyrants that we talked about earlier. So what happened was he threw Paulie off his boat, thinking, well, Paulie's not going to go anywhere. Paulie went the next day, got his captaincy test, got a boat, went out the next day and outfished his old boss. And while he outfished his old boss, he was on the phone to his old boss, talking to him and telling him about how many he had caught. And you should have seen his old boss's face. There's the first 20 pages already written, mate.
Yeah.
It really is a decent show. And I think anything you watch that calls to you and resonates with you, there's a reason for it, so enjoy it.
Yeah.
That's an amazing way that you've just disguised your life story as a story about a fisherman. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
Perhaps
not talk about a small IT company in Antrim.
Yeah.
That I spent 4 million years in. I was Polly. I was
just going to say, unlike Dracula, perhaps your metaphor was not as well veiled.
And on that surprise, I am going to head out of this episode of our.
Well, listen, I think we actually need to wrap it, folks, because I'm glancing down the sheet of my beautifully prepared questions, and because, as I feared, creatives are just ramble on, you have literally touched on every point we were going to touch on without me needing to. In fact, I can edit me out of this, which is
You would almost have thought that was a plan, and the questions had been pre-read, mate.
The mistake was letting you read them. I should have just sent you like the first 4 letters for each question and allowed you to guess the rest. Folks, listen, it has been an absolute pleasure. I know from this chat we can carry this on. There will be more things to talk about as the work starts to come out. We will revisit this. I'm going to thank you now because I know Jessica wants to run away. And hide quite ready, but we know where to find you now, and that's one great thing about Northern Ireland. Once we know where you live, you'll never get away.
Well, Liam Neeson taught us that in the Tekken films, mate, but maybe in a more sinister way.
Certainly, and speaking of sinister, Santa Claus in a Northern Ireland accent doesn't get much more sinister, mate.
What do you want? What do you want for Christmas, little boy? What do you want? What do you want for stocking?
Folks, I'm going to say it's been a pleasure. It has been for me. I practically got to watch this episode as well. Big thank you to Jessica Martin. Big thank you to Chris McAuley. Big thank you to Stoker McAuley. Do check out the links, which kind of will have been on the screen. We'll put them in the write-up afterwards as well. Check out their other work. Check out what they're about. And do keep an eye on these 2 ascending stars in the dark world of Dracula. Thanks for watching, and good night.
Bye, folks.
Good night.
There you go.